It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Smooth and Savvy is joined by some of the hottest talent in the entertainment industry, from musicians to authors and all those in between. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here he is, Mr. Smooth and Savvy himself, Douglas Coleman.
Well, hello there. How are you? It's me, Douglas Coleman. Nice of you to come and listen to my show. Today we've got music from Music X-Ray. You know, I've been getting a lot of submissions from them. I need to clear the backlog somewhat, and so much of the music is good. It's really good music. So this show, and probably next week, we're going to feature about 5 songs at the beginning of the show, and then we'll go into an interview. Today, our guests are Charles and Linda Musselwhite, who are the founders of the website Fun Loving Couples. It's a very light conversation. It's a lot of fun, just talking about things that I think apply to everybody, relationships and getting along with your significant other and the challenges that people face when they're in a long-term relationship. Without further ado, let's list off who we're going to be playing. First up is a song called Ride by House of Amber, followed by Attractive by Cinema Star, You'll Never Be Alone by Mr. Blitz, Entangled in Love, written by Patrick Lockwood, vocals by Chris Bradley, and finally Taffy by Derek Bishop.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy, right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Control these feelings. been watching you, and I've been studying the things you do, and there's always something new to turn me on. I've been hanging around, and I've been trying to pick up when you're down, and I hope I won't lose sight of what I found. 'Cause it's so attractive, it's so attractive, it's so attractive when you know Just one more government lie. Oh no. How long must this go on? We see our freedom almost gone. Don't you know? Don't you know? You'll never be alone. In the middle of the burning night, we see the secrets that you hide. Don't you know? You'll never be alone. We are targets in their eyes, just another domestic spy. Don't you know? Don't you know? You'll never be alone. We see mysteries in your mind. What is there we will find. You'll never be alone. Drones sweeping through the sky. No one's safe from prying eyes. Just one more government lie. Oh no. How long must this go on? We see our freedom almost gone. Don't you know? Don't you know? You'll never be alone.
They told me that you trapped me, how boldly you kidnapped me, but gladly we're madly entangled in love, and there is no denying that love can be so trying. We're truly unruly, entangled in love, where I feel the ante for love. So no fairy tales, let's not be deceiving. The truth about falling in love, it's never out of fashion, such honesty and passion. We're captured in a rapture, entangled in love. They told me that you'd trapped me, how boldly you kidnapped me, but gladly we're madly entangled in love, and there is no denying that love can be so trying. We're truly unruly, entangled in love, where I think the ante for love. So no fairy tales, let's not be deceiving. The truth about falling in love, it's never out of fashion. Such honesty and passion were captured in a rapture, entangled in love, and sang out in love.
Charles and Linda were high school sweethearts, both coming from the proverbial broken home, but they vowed early on in their relationship to stick it out through thick and thin no matter what. Almost 30 years later, Charles and Linda's marriage thrives, having weathered the storm of kids, businesses, homes, finances, families, and with their latest venture, Fun-Loving Couples, they love to speak about those issues that can get in the way of marriage and partnerships. Okay, please welcome Charles and Linda Musselwhite. Hi, guys. How are you?
We're great. How you doing, Douglas?
Doing well, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for having us on today. Honor and a privilege.
Oh, my pleasure. I was looking over your bio. Although it's nice, it doesn't really tell us much about exactly what you guys do. So if you could, please, just tell us a little bit about what exactly it is you do.
Absolutely. So we recently started a community called Fun-Loving Couples. It's for committed couples who like to travel, eat well, work out, and have fun. Maybe not all of those, but a few or a couple of those. And what we like to say is we believe by doing this, it helps to bring back adventure into your relationship.
Yeah, our focus is that complacency is a silent killer. And in our other business, we've been working together less than 6 feet apart, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. You typically find us less than 6 feet apart, and we have a marketing agency. So couple of things, when we share that with a lot of folks, most of them say, oh my gosh, how do you do it? I'd pull my eyes out if I had to work with my spouse. And my response is, I get it, but it just works for us. And I can't say that, it was just magic and it happens without any work because, it's like anybody else. There's, we have our own challenges, our own obstacles, but, by choice, we do what we do. And also by choice, we started Fun-Loving Couples because of that, complacency is a silent killer. And just thought we had some ideas and some things to share with other folks to help improve their relationships as well.
So is this a counseling service?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
Could not do counseling. Counseling I find to be very draining. I simply want to live life together with other folks who are interested in, growing their relationships.
So it's more of like advice giving?
So we like to think of it as a community. And here's the thing, like I said, we don't profess to possibly know all the answers, not even some of the answers, right? We know some of them, but what's worked for us. But I truly believe that in community, you've gone through your own set of experiences and circumstances and have your own perspective on those things. And you might just hold that nugget that unlocks the key for me in some areas. And I also think that there's responsibility in that. Right. The things that we've been challenged with in our lives might look horrible compared to someone, while it looks like a walk in the park to somebody else. But in there, in community, in sharing, what's worked for you, what hasn't worked for you in the past, I think is a great way to help each other get further along and reach the goals that we want. So not doing counseling, not giving advice other than just, like I said, living life together and having an interest in seeing other couples increase and improve their relationships.
Is this a business for you, or is this just something you do because you want to do?
I know Linda's got a comment. I'll say this. I think there is a business in it, but right now that's not our focus. It simply is it's a passion project for us.
Okay.
Yeah. I think, for us, sometimes we'll go out, but we also want to go out with other couples that are like-minded or you like to do the same things that we like to do. So it's not that it was out of necessity, but it was out of, of a passion that we had for relationships, for, committed relationships, and to be able to just do it together with each other. So whether we're, at a winery, like we discussed early on, before we got live, or at a restaurant or hiking. Whatever the case may be, to do it with others and have fun.
Okay. Let's go back a little bit, if you would. It says you've been married for 30 years. Is that correct?
We've been together for 30 years and married for 25.
Okay. And you were high school sweethearts. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, let's be clear. I had a crush on her. I'm not so sure she was taken with me at the time. But
tell us a little bit about how you met. How did that? What was the scenario there?
Oh my goodness! So funny story. I'll save you the boring 2-hour dissertation style. But we met by accident at a park. Linda was driving through with a bunch of her girlfriends in the car, and they did it 3 or 4 different times, and finally I stopped and got in the car, and Linda didn't want anything to do with me. wouldn't even look at me. She was driving the car and I was in the back seat. Long story short, we ended up hanging out and then went on a couple of dates. And, here we are 30 years later.
And it says you've weathered the storm of marriage, kids, businesses, homes, finances, and family issues. So you've had your ups and downs in the past 30 years, I would suspect.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't puppy dogs and rainbows the whole time.
Okay, so from high school, what happened then?
Well, college happened for Charles. So then we had, the long distance relationship for a couple of years. Shortly after that, early 20s, we had our first child, our daughter. And then we relocated to, we were from Pennsylvania. We relocated to California, to Southern California. So from the time both of our children were little, three and a newborn, we had been on our own, just the four of us. So, we had to figure out how to survive without, external family members and do everything on our own.
Yeah, and then you've got the issues where, as you grow up and mature, in our household, we didn't have the best financial skills. So, we ran into some financial problems. And as we've all heard, right, the finances are probably one of the number one killers of relationships. And we went through that stuff. I mean, we had some bad times, financially speaking, but we weathered the storm. Then we move on and kids grow up. Kids grow from being, little and impressionable to now we've got teenagers with their own attitudes and the I hate you parent complex. So, another trying time in our marriage where I could see how couples, husbands and wives, would point the finger at each other, blaming them for what's going on. And I mean, it came down to a choice. For us, it was, well, while this sucks and completely not where we want to be, last thing that we're going to do is throw in the towel, blame each other, and then check out. That's what our parents did. Both of our parents were, the proverbial broken family. And then here's an interesting point is, it's like anything else. Age happens, parents get older, and, the dynamic changes. And that's where we are now. We've got one parent that's dealing with some major health issues. We have other parents that are getting older, and we're at a point in our life where we've got to at least provide some care, financially, physically, whatever it looks like. And that's a whole different dynamic that there's no book on this stuff, right? You just can't go out there and say, how do I prepare? It does add a challenge. It adds, more distractions, and you've got to be able to fight for it and, expect, or at least have some anticipation of what's coming and know there's going to be some work to be done. Because again, without having a plan, it can be very easy where it's, I'm just withdrawing and I don't really care and I'm checking out.
And I think a united plan. So being on the same page with one another, is really key as well.
Critical.
So you guys both came from divorced families?
Yes.
How has that affected your relationship? Has it made it stronger, or did it give you some kind of tips as what not to do? Yeah,
actually, when we were dating, when we were still in high school, it was one of the things that we discussed a lot was that, that's not going to happen to us, especially if we bring kids into the world that, we're not going to threaten each other with the D word, So it was something that we discussed thoroughly for a long time and, just came to the conclusion that we have to be a united front and, not really. Our parents split up when we were little, so for both of us, so there really wasn't too much of the parental rules there, but, just the day-to-day after that. So once you get older and you realize what's going on and then, dealing with going to this house or traveling here or doing that or, split holidays and things like that was just something that, again, we vowed that wasn't going to happen to us.
Actually take the same point, but take it a step further, I was a single child. Linda's got a brother and, the dynamic for us, was a little bit different, but, there's, when you're a kid and your parents are breaking up, that's crazy, right? Disruptive. You don't know, emotionally, you just don't know how to deal with it. And, I can tell you, from my perspective, even though I didn't understand what was going on, I hated the fact that my parents weren't together and it made me feel like crap. And it just messed with me mentally. But, by the grace of God, here I am today. But it's also one of those things where, there are no absolutes. So I can't say that divorce is never right, because I'm sure there are some. But at the end of the day, it was also for us where if something was broke, it's kind of like that old adage: if it's not broke, it doesn't need to be fixed. But if it is broke, we didn't just throw it away. We want to roll up our sleeves and go to work and take care of things. And that, to me, that attitude is a lot different than a lot of other folks who at least have gone through a divorce or contemplated a divorce. And again, I know that it's not a broad stroke, and I can say it happens to everybody. But I've talked to guys who have 19, 20 years of marriage in, and they're talking about divorce. To me, that's crazy, because I couldn't even imagine. I couldn't imagine coming home to an empty house. I couldn't imagine coming home and not having, my wife there to talk to, debrief, to do whatever. I couldn't imagine being in my 60s, 70s, or 80s and not having a companion there and just being lonely. And to me, those all became great motivators as to why we do work on our relationship and not just take it as it comes and not be complacent.
Well, you brought up an interesting point where you said that, people who have been married for 20 years, 25 years, and then they file for divorce. I never understood that, because I can understand somebody getting married and being together for a couple of years, 3, 4, 5 years, and you both realize, okay, this isn't the right one. But
Yep.
You would think that after 20 years, and especially if you've had kids and then your kids are grown, you have this whole sort of track record of life together. It's hard for me to conceive that you would just want to sort of throw that away. I don't know. Maybe it was 20 unhappy years for some of those people, and they just stuck together for whatever reason. A lot of times you hear, they stuck together for the kids' sake, even though they didn't get along. But I don't know. I find it more difficult to grasp why somebody would stay together for that long and then get divorced. The one that is popping into my head right now that I just read about, was Sharon and Ozzy Osbourne.
Yeah.
And I thought they were a great couple. I thought they were like the perfect couple. She kind of managed his weirdness and, and now they're separated, I guess. I don't know if they've actually filed for divorce, but I don't know. I don't quite get that. I agree with you that, especially as you get older, that you want that other person there. I was 43 before I got married. I tell you, I don't want to go back, because I spent the good part of my life alone. I was working 12 hours a day at that point, so I didn't have time to do much of anything else. But, now I've been together for going on 11 years. And
Nice.
the idea of going back to being single again is awful.
I agree, and I take a walk with it because I've had a lot of conversations, primarily with men. I feel I'm very comfortable talking with guys about their relationships with their wives. And one of the things that I came away with was no one ever woke up 19 years, 20 years into their marriage and woke up and said, what, I'm just out of here. This sucks. It all started many, many years ago, and you're right. I could see, you would think that it would be 2, 3, 4 years and it's not working, I'm out. After, some period of time, though, that you should be drawn closer together. But what I found is that, if you're not willing to unite, if you're not willing to be proactive in dealing with the difficult things, the uncomfortable things, you really start to pull away. And so, again, no one just wakes up 19 years in and says, I want to get a divorce. You go back 10, 15 years into marriage and you see where one of them chooses to, it's just not worth it. I don't want to have this conversation. I don't care about discussing finances with you. I don't care about the kids are driving me crazy. I just don't care. Right. And so when you stop caring about the other person, you turn that switch off in your head. And here we are 19 years later. And so if I've turned my switch off and I'm not investing or pouring into my wife, and the result of that is, probably the same amount of time she stopped receiving and then also stopped giving. You wake up 19 years later and you're so far apart that's the next logical step is, well, I'm out, I'm leaving.
Well, you brought up a good word in there, investing, and that's the word that came to my head. When you've got 20 years invested in it, and it's like your IRA or your 401k. You've been putting the money away for 20 years, and then one day you just say, "Oh, screw it." You pull all the money out and go spend it, And meanwhile, that was supposed to be the money to keep you for the rest of your life. It seems to me that's what it's like. that after
Yeah.
20 years of marriage, you're just going to throw it away in one day, because a divorce only takes a day in court, I think. You just file your papers and that's about it, if there's no, big legal hassles over the house and all that kind of stuff.
Process aside, right? It takes one day or not, right? Think about the mental state that leads up to. Again, no one wakes up and just says, I'm out. It's been years, if not decades, of this, of this going through their head. And then that day finally comes where they pull the trigger. And whether their kids are little or their kids are adults, there is collateral damage. There's collateral damage in the family, right? So it's not just the husband
Right.
and the wife. The kids are affected. The brothers and sisters are affected. The parents are affected. Your neighbors are affected. Your coworkers are affected. I mean, there's a lot of collateral damage that goes on there that, that the selfishness of, I just want it my way and I'm getting the hell out of here, really has a big impact on other folks.
Well, and let's face it. I mean, if somebody is married for 20 years and then they get a divorce and say they're in their 40s or 50s, they're going to go out into the dating scene again.
Mhm.
And that's not a place that I'm 54 years old this year. That's not a place I want to go. Not at this stage in my life. It was okay when I was in my 20s. At 54 to start doing that, going online and posting my picture and profile again. I don't think so.
Exactly.
That just that's not where I want to go at all.
I couldn't do it. I just say this, with 20 years, 30 years in, I wake up every day looking for the excitement and the adventure that's going to present, to us that day. And here's the thing. I mean, that it doesn't happen every day. Not every day is this big, big excitement fest. We don't have, big marching bands. But what we do is we're very deliberate and very intentional with knowing each other's routines. So I know how I compliment my wife. She knows how she compliments me. We give each other space and respect those areas. But I think that our relationship now is much, much stronger. So initially it was probably more physical. Hey, you look great. I like this. You make me feel good. All those things. But here I am, 30 years into it, and I often joke, and I want to say this in a way that isn't disparaging and isn't misunderstood. But I looked at my wife one day and I said, you know what? Even if you were a burn victim, I'm not going anywhere. And it's because it's not about the physical anymore, right? It's not about me looking at her body and saying, oh, I enjoy that. It's not about me looking at her face and saying, oh, you're so beautiful. I'm connected with my wife on a much higher plane now. And regardless of what her need is, and the reason I say a burn victim is, to me, that one would require a lot, right? Because the person that you've looked at now has physically changed.
Right.
Their needs are through the roof. But to me, I'm not connected. I'm not just there for her body and her looks. At this point, I'm there. As I tell her, you got this big, beautiful brain, and it's appealing to me. It's sexy to me. I like the way that you think. I like the way that you act. I like the things that you do. And it's not just about the body anymore. So for me, that's, we got 20 years in, and because we know each other intimately, I think that's where people can get into trouble when they start to know each other so intimately that it becomes routine and they lose interest. But I think you got to work at keeping that interest up. And when you do, I think there's much higher levels of connection that are available to all of us.
Well, it's interesting you said that, because I have met people maybe you work with in an office, or people you've had some kind of connection to for a time. Sometimes you look at them, like on the first meeting, you can look at them and say, wow, really beautiful woman or really handsome guy. So the physical appearance, you're impressed by. But then I've had both situations where somebody who was really physically good looking, as soon as they started to speak, they became really much less appealing. And their physical appearance sort of got pushed under the rug because their personality was so obnoxious. On the other end of that coin, the other side of the coin, is I've met people that were kind of not particularly good looking. But once you started to talk to them, they sort of became more beautiful as they talked to you, because their inner self was so strong that it just sort of superseded whatever they were lacking in the physical department. So I could see that in a marriage where that would sort of almost have to happen, because I think people who married purely for physical appearance, I think this is why a lot of Hollywood marriages don't work.
Yeah.
And then probably the egos too. When you have two actors married to each other. I think that's a recipe for disaster. But you're right. I mean, it's the inner self, and especially the longer you're with somebody, that becomes much more important. Because let's face it, we stay together for 30 years, we're going to change physically. Some of us put on weight, we're going to lose our hair. You can't expect your spouse to stay looking the same as they did when they were 20 years old. One of your bullet points here that I wanted to cover is it says, what is the number one obstacle to a healthy relationship? I think I know what it is, but I want to hear what you think it is.
Well, that's a good one. And I think it's complacency. I mean, just going day to day, doing your thing. And, I think Charles mentioned the routine, but the routine so much that it makes you complacent in the relationship.
Yeah, I agree with it. It is, in my opinion, it is complacency, but complacency, can affect so many different areas, right? When I become complacent in my thoughts towards my wife, like I don't care anymore. I become complacent in the way I communicate with her anymore. I really don't care if I hurt her feelings or if I make her feel good or not. I just don't really care, right? When she feels like I'm not thinking of her, putting her first, right? I become complacent in that. And here's the thing, like I said, you've got to be deliberate and intentional with these things, because if not, right? I mean, I think there's this thing where a lot of us look for efficiencies in our lives, right? So when you're at work, you want to find an efficient way to get your work day done. You want to move through that as quickly as possible. Your things around the house, you want to be as efficient as possible to get them done so they don't take up your time. I don't think that's a luxury that we can have in our relationships, because if we do pull that card, that's where we end up years later, where I've become so complacent and taken you for granted. I don't even consider you anymore. We become more like friends and roommates than husbands and wives, spouses and lovers. Everyone talks about communication, and I get it. I think communication is high up on that list. But for me, it truly is complacency. When my commitment has waned, my consideration has waned, I'm not cooperative, I don't compromise, I don't communicate with you like I used to, or at least, have interest in you, then what's the response to that? That your spouse or your partner starts to pull away as well, because they're not, they're not feeling that same energy, that same exchange that was once there. And just to back up a moment ago, you talked about, our bodies look different. Well, of course they look different. They should look different. It'd be weird if, I'm 60 years old and I still have a 20-year-old body. Not that it might not be appealing, but that's just not the way we're built. But I do say to my wife every day that, you know what? We've earned those wrinkles. We've earned those curves. We've earned all these things. And I look at them as they're to be embraced. At one point, a 20-year-old female body was very intriguing to me. And I'm not saying that they're not pretty, but it's not my wife's body. I like every curve, I call them dents and barnacles. I love all those things about her, but it's really what defines her. It's what makes her her, what makes her unique to me. And like I said, for me, I don't look at sags and wrinkles as a bad thing. I look at them as, hey, that's time invested. We've earned these and we should embrace them.
Okay, so you said complacency was probably the number one obstacle.
Yes.
To a healthy relationship. I was going to say trust.
Well, I think I wouldn't disagree with you. I think trust is a big one, but same thing. If I'm not complacent in my marriage, I don't give my wife any reason to not trust me, right? And only when I become complacent, like I'm at work and some young chippy's got my eye and I stop turning my attentions towards my wife, I think the trust is a symptom of complacency and not necessarily the cause itself. It can be, but I think there's other leading factors in that lack of trust, right? Like I've done something either blatantly to my wife, she caught me checking out some other female or talking to some other female or just being inappropriate in that respect, or that my attitude and behavior towards my wife has changed somewhat that it now causes suspicion, which again would be sort of a lack of trust. But to me, it's like there's a distraction that's outside of it where I'm no longer focused so much on my wife that something else has my time and attention.
Boundaries can be set differently for different couples.
My answer is I think they have to. And again, there's no absolutes, right? So what works for you and your wife may look polar opposite to what works for me and my wife. But the point there is that we are taking deliberate and intentional steps to discuss and plan and prepare. Only when we don't do those things and just kind of allow things to happen, I think is where you can end up in hot water. And so again, I can't just always model my relationship off of somebody else, but I truly believe you've got to spend time talking about things, preparing for things. And I think that's one of the successes that we've had in our marriage is that, number one, we've always had an open conversation. I'll give you one, for instance, where we didn't. We went to this concert one time, and I remember the day just being very fun. We had a great time, great music. We were backstage, had talked to a lot of folks. And then fast forward 10 years later. Now, this tripped me out, Douglas. 10 years later, we're in Hawaii walking down the beach. And my wife says to me, hey, do you remember that time we were at that concert? Oh, yeah, I remember that. It felt like yesterday, blah, blah. Well, you remember you're looking at that girl? And I'm like, wait a minute. I wasn't looking at any girl. Oh, yeah, you were looking. And so she went on. What struck me is that, holy crap, for 10 years, my wife has been walking around with this. She's been white knuckling this thing that's been on her mind. It's been, distraction for her. How did we get here? And what hit me was, number one is, as strong as our relationship was, I still did something that caused her to have concern and worry. I still did something that she didn't feel comfortable or confident that she could bring to me. And I'm telling you, we work on these things. So that was, for me as a man, that was one of those eye-opening moments that, okay, there's still more work to do. I've got to be conscientious about what I'm doing. And so that's why I go back to, we take deliberate and intentional steps to talk about where we are today in our marriage. Like we do in our business, like we do in a lot of other things. And not only that, but where do we want to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now? This year is our 25th wedding anniversary. We're going to Fiji. We've been talking about this trip for 10 years. Easy. Where are we going to be on our 25th wedding anniversary? And I just say that's as an example of the things, there's something to be said about spontaneity, but there's also, I think, a big part of it that you've got to be deliberate and intentional so that you don't wind up getting caught off guard or blindsided by a bigger issue.
And when you talk about being deliberate and intentional, does the word consideration factor in there as well?
Absolutely.
Has to.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So it's not all about me and it's not all about Linda, right?
Right.
We agree to disagree, but we've also got to be able to say, you know what, in this relationship, we're considerate of one another. And sometimes that means that, there's cooperation and compromise that comes into it as well. So then I might not get 100% of what I want, but if 100% of what I want is going to make you feel like crap, then I should be okay with giving up some of that, if not maybe even all of it, just so that, in consideration of my spouse.
Selfishness is a real tough one on a relationship.
Yes.
That I learned because when I spent the better part of my life being alone, it was very easy to be selfish when you're the only one in the house. But when all of a sudden there's another person there, it changes everything. I mean, just down to where we're going to leave the remote on the coffee table. Stuff just the littlest things that you did not deal with when you were single. And all of these little things can sort of add up and become big things at some point. I think you're right. I think that's where the compromise is. You have to give up a lot of that and you concentrate on the more important things.
So Douglas, I'd like to just take a pause right, because to me that is one of those critical points. So think about it, right? The big things, if my wife caught me cheating or I caught her cheating, clearly that's grounds for a lot of emotion and elevated tones and I hate yous and all that stuff, right? But and so we all understand that. But when it's something simple as the remote's not in the right spot, or you didn't put the milk back the way I like, you didn't park the car the way I like it. It's one of those things where in our head, I'm not even going to talk about it because it's just, she pisses me off, but we're going to talk about it. But when you hold on to that for, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, it does grow to a point where now it just becomes an explosion. So those little things, in a lot of ways for me, are the ones that you've got to talk about, because if left unchecked, they become big things. And, that's a bad place to be.
I'll give you an example of that. Is that my mother and father were complete opposites in that way. My mother would lose it at the slightest little thing. But in 5 minutes, she had completely forgotten about what she was upset about. My father had a very slow fuse, and he would just take it and take it and take it and whatever it was. But then when he lost it, he would disappear for a week. And it took him that long to process all of that stuff that he had been holding on to. It's interesting because I think I'm somewhere in the middle. Sometimes I do hold on to things that I probably shouldn't. On the other hand, sometimes it's easier to get rid of it now than it probably was 20 years ago. But I think that goes back to the selfishness. Being a considerate spouse requires you to forget about some of the small stuff and let it go. Do you agree?
Absolutely.
100%. I'm not very eloquent in the way I describe this, but when I create that environment for my wife where something is just, okay, is the remote in the right spot? What's more important, the remote being in the right spot or creating an environment for my wife where she feels loved and appreciated and, sought, right? I'm seeking her. And again, you can plug in whatever remote in the wrong place you want, right? In terms of what that thing is. Did you park the car wrong? Is the bank balance checked? I don't like my chicken dry. I like it to be moist. I mean, there's a million things you can plug in there. But again, what's more important? Is my selfishness in that issue more important than my relationship with my spouse? And again, so it's going to be different for everybody. Some people might have a real sticking point on something that I would look at and say, well, that's just ridiculous. It doesn't matter. They're not me. I'm not them. But that's why I say intentionally and deliberately in your own marriage, your own relationships, you've got to come together, discuss the ground rules, what you're happy with. And the other thing is this, even with the best laid plans, we've also got to be prepared for those things to change, right? You can't just say these are the ground rules and it's not a one and done, set it and forget it, put on the shelf, because the dynamics of kids coming into the marriage, the dynamics of having young adults moving out of your house, the dynamics of getting older, the dynamics of finances, the dynamics of friends, family. I mean, there's a number of different things that are going to pop up that will cause you to have to revisit the way that we said we're going to lay this thing out, and then what changes are going to come up. And that's dynamic. It happens all the time. It just doesn't become static.
There's also that issue of counting cookies, is how I like to refer to it. Where you can say, okay, well, I did one cookie, you do one cookie. And you can get to a point where constantly sort of keeping score. Well, I did this for you today, so you have to. And it's like the idea of giving somebody something and expecting something in return. I don't think that works in a marriage. I don't think that if I do something, I should expect anything back. On the other hand, if I do something constantly and I don't get anything back, then I start to question why I'm doing it in the first place. So there is a real balancing act there, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things we say is marriage isn't 50-50, it's 100-100.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yes.
So thinking of it that way, helps put things into perspective. But of course, we have feelings, we have emotions, things get in the way and, skew us sometimes. And, one of the sayings we had when our kids were younger is we need to pick and choose the battles. So I think the same applies in relationships. You have to pick and choose the battles. So yes, I took out the trash, for the last 2 months. You haven't done it, but is it worth arguing over or not?
And to your point, Douglas, when you're counting cookies, as you put it, that again just takes me back to this selfishness, as if, well, I've got my own pot, you have your own pot, versus it's our pot, right? So the way I look at it is, whatever we're dealing with, it's not mine and hers, it's ours. And collectively, we're either withdrawing or contributing to.
Although some people work well with those kind of lines, like, okay, this is my space, this is your space, this is our space.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've seen that. Sometimes that works as well.
And so that's a great point. That's why I go back to, again, what works for us may not work for anybody else. And that's fine. It's not meant to. All I'm saying is that we believe strongly that it left unchecked, not taking time to invest into, can create those issues. So you've got to find out, again, what's going to work in your relationship, what's not. You just can't, I think, jump in and expect that the way you've always done things without consideration of your partner or your spouse is just going to magically happen. Maybe it does for some folks, but at one point in our marriage early on, I used to always talk to folks that we never fight. Well, maybe that's healthy, maybe it isn't. But later on, down the road, years into it, we've had disagreements, but they've been disagreements where it really needs to be for us to air the laundry, get it out, identify what the cause, what the root is, and address it. And again, sometimes there's compromise made. Sometimes there's no compromise made. Sometimes my feelings get hurt. Sometimes Linda's feelings get hurt. But at the end of the day, we're not picking sides and choosing what corner to hang out, and we come back together to work from the same perspective, the same platform, that same bank account.
Guys, we are just about out of time. Do you have a website where people can come and check you guys out?
Yes. Yep. Right now it's a blog site, and it's funlovingcouples.com.
And are you on Twitter and Facebook at all?
We sure are. So
Okay.
on Facebook, we have a Facebook page, and then we also have a secret Facebook group for those that would like to join the community. We just need to ask a few questions and then invite them in.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This was very enlightening.
I hope so. And Douglas, we could go on. We could pontificate for hours. So we thank you for the opportunity. And if you ever want to talk to us again, we'd be honored.
Well, that's about all the time we've got for the show today. I want to thank my special guests, Charles and Linda Musselwhite. And thank you to everybody who submitted their music on Music X-Ray. This is Douglas Coleman saying goodbye.
To the